All right, let's get right into it. For what, the last 10 years, the tech world has been singing the same song. Break it down, go microservices. But what if that whole narrative is, well, not quite right? What if the king isn't actually dead? What if the monolith is one of the most powerful, high-performance tools we've got? I mean, you've heard this, right? This is the story. The monolith is painted as this dusty old dinosaur, this one giant, messy blob of code that's totally impossible to scale and a complete nightmare to work with. It's basically the villain in every tech blog post you've read for years. But hang on a second. What if this entire story, this frantic rush to break everything apart, has made us forget some fundamental truths? What if we've been trading pure, raw performance and simplicity for a mountain of complexity that maybe, just maybe, we don't actually need?
To figure this out, we have to cut through all that noise. Before we can have a real conversation, we need to get past the stereotypes and actually understand what a monolith is, not just the scary monster it's been made out to be.
Okay, so here's the absolute key thing to get your head around. A monolith is defined by one thing, its deployment. It's not about how big the code is. The real question is, if you change one tiny thing, do you have to deploy the whole application again? If the answer is yes, that's a monolith. It's all about that single unified deployment. And you know what? This all-in-one structure has some seriously incredible advantages baked right in. Everything's running in the same place, so different parts of the app can share data instantly. It usually has one big database, which means you get these rock-solid guarantees. We call them ACID transactions. It basically means an operation, like a customer placing an order, either happens perfectly or not at all. Your data stays clean. And trying to figure out what a user did? Easy. It's all in one log file. Super simple. All right, let's just go there. Let's tackle the biggest myth of them all. The one you hear over and over again. Yeah, but you can't scale a monolith. Well, this is where the conversation gets really interesting. Because the argument for the monolith isn't just a matter of opinion or, which framework you like better. No, this is grounded in the basic, unchangeable laws of physics. We're talking about the speed of light. So let's just try to make this real. An internal function call, the kind a monolith makes all day long, is on a human scale like reading a single word, instant. Now, a network call to another service, even when in the same building, is the equivalent of taking a weekend vacation. Just let that sink in. Every single time your microservices talk to each other, you're paying the price of a mini vacation.
Yeah, let's just put a number on that. A network call is, best case scenario, 10,000 times slower. That is not a small difference. That is a performance cliff that you are just jumping right off of.
This is what people call the network tax, and you're paying it all the time. A single click from a user in a microservice world could trigger dozens of these little weekend vacations, all adding up, slowing everything down. The monolith, it pays almost none of that tax for its internal work. And hey, if you think this is all just talk, look at Shopify. They run one of the biggest e-commerce platforms on the planet on what they actually proudly call their majestic monolith. So how do they scale? They just make copies of the whole thing. They call them pods and run them side by side. It's proof that with smart engineering, a monolith can handle absolutely massive scale. Okay. So they can be fast and they can scale. But what about the other big complaint? Aren't they all just doomed to become this messy, tangled, impossible to maintain big ball of mud? Well, not necessarily. And this right here is the most important distinction. People are confusing a badly designed system, which can happen with any architecture, with the pattern itself. A big ball of mud isn't an architecture. It's a failure of discipline. The solution, the modern approach, is the modular monolith. And that is a very intentional, very clean architecture. So here's how it actually works. You organize your code around what the business does. A module for catalog, a module for ordering, not by technical stuff. Each of these modules is like a little microservice living inside the monolith. It has a public face, an API, and the rest is private. And the best part? We now have tools like Spring Monolith or Packwork that actually check and enforce these boundaries for you automatically. They stop the spaghetti code before it even starts. So we've kind of defended the monolith's honor a bit. Now, let's flip the script. Let's talk about the hidden costs of going distributed. Let's talk about the microservice complexity tax. I mean, just look at this. This is what it takes to do something that sounds incredibly simple, like renaming a column in a database without taking your system down. It's not one step. It's a 5-act play with multiple deployments, multiple scripts. This is the kind of mind-numbing overhead you sign up for every single day.
Oh, and it gets so much worse. You lose those simple, beautiful, reliable database transactions we talked about. Now, to make sure an order goes through correctly across 3 different services, you have to build these insanely complex workarounds, like the saga pattern, which is basically a chain of undo actions if anything goes wrong. You're rebuilding something that a monolith just gives you for free. So, after all this, what's the takeaway? What do we actually do? Well, it all points to a really clear, really pragmatic strategy for building things. And we don't have to take my word for it. Let's just listen to a giant in the world of software design, Martin Fowler. He says that pretty much all the success stories you hear about microservices, they didn't start that way. They started as a monolith that grew and was then broken apart when it absolutely had to be. And the logic here is just rock solid. Why start with a modular monolith? Because it lets you focus on building your actual product instead of wrestling with complicated infrastructure. You let the natural dividing lines in your system show themselves over time instead of guessing up front. And then, if one specific part of your app needs to scale it crazy, you can just pull that one piece out into its own service. Simple. And look, this isn't just a strategy for tiny startups. Some of the absolute biggest players in tech rely on this idea. Shopify, Stack Overflow, even Uber, who went famously all in on microservices, is now pulling them back together into bigger services they call monoliths. You can feel it. The pendulum is definitely swinging back. So let's be clear, the takeaway here isn't that monoliths are good and microservices are bad. It's about using the right tool for the job. For almost any new project, for smaller teams, and especially when keeping your data perfectly consistent is critical, the monolith is just the stronger, simpler choice. Microservices are a special tool for solving very specific and honestly pretty rare problems, like the kind of scale and fault tolerance Netflix needs. And that really leaves us with one last, really important question you should be asking yourself. The choice isn't really monolith versus microservice. It's simplicity versus complexity. So before you agree to pay that massive complexity tax, just be honest. Is the architecture you're choosing solving a real problem you have today? Or is it a solution for a problem you just think you might have someday in the future? The answer to that question could save you a world of pain.